Every prisoner on death row in Nebraska, full list and shocking crimes. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Today, we will track the killers in Nebraska who didn't need to hide because their brutality did all the talking. Number 1, Nikko Allen Jenkins. He was out of prison for just 10 days. But in that short span, Nikko Jenkins turned the streets of Omaha into a war zone, leaving 4 people dead and a system on trial. On July 30, 2013, Jenkins was released early from a Nebraska prison, despite a well-documented history of severe mental illness. His record included hallucinations, self-harm, and psychiatric hospitalization dating back to childhood. Still, he walked free. By August 11th, 2 men, Juan Uribe Pena and Jorge Galindo Ruiz, were lured into a trap with the promise of sex. Instead, they were executed, each shot in the head, their pockets turned inside out. 8 days later, Jenkins killed 22-year-old Curtis Bradford, a former prison acquaintance. Hours before his death, they had taken a smiling photo together and posted it online. Jenkins later claimed his sister fired the first shot, but he finished it. Then, on August 21st, he targeted Andrea Kruger, a mother of 3. Jenkins dragged her from her SUV and shot her 4 times. Her body was found on the road, the vehicle missing. He later admitted he wanted her car for further crimes. He was arrested on August 29th, not for the murders, but for terroristic threats. In an 8-hour interrogation, Jenkins calmly confessed to all 4 killings. He called them offerings to the ancient Egyptian serpent god Apophis. "I was protecting the kingdom," he said. What emerged was a portrait of a deeply disturbed man who had studied camera placement to avoid detection, who coached relatives on criminal activity, and who relished in chaos. Prosecutors dismissed his divine delusions as manipulation. They called the crimes organized, targeted, and fully intentional. In 2014, Jenkins represented himself in court. He pleaded no contest and was convicted. In 2017, a 3-judge panel sentenced him to death, the state's first death penalty since reinstating capital punishment in 2016. He also received 450 years for other charges. Jenkins' past is riddled with system failures, childhood abuse, foster care, solitary confinement, and untreated schizophrenia. He mutilated himself repeatedly in prison. Yet the court couldn't agree if he was truly insane or playing a part. In 2025, Jenkins requested an execution date. Weeks later, in a hearing, he appeared dazed and incoherent. A new mental health evaluation was denied. His victims' families, after years of grief and legal delays, were left in limbo. Curtis Bradford's mother captured the sentiment best: "He had power over my life for 4 years. He doesn't have that power today." Jenkins remains on death row at Tecumseh. But Nebraska has not executed anyone since 2018. With lethal injection protocol stalled, the sentence remains symbolic. This case shows what happens when mental illness and violent impulses go unchecked in the cracks of bureaucracy. The consequences are irreversible. Release decisions must factor psychiatric history with long-term monitoring, not just completed sentences. Early signs of trauma in youth demand real, sustained intervention, not paperwork. Post-release supervision for violent offenders must be intelligence-led, not reactive. Justice delayed can sometimes be justice denied, but when justice misunderstands madness, the cost is measured in lives. Number 2, Patrick Schroeder. He didn't escape. He didn't riot. He simply waited, then killed again, not in secret, but in plain sight of a system that failed to stop him. Patrick Schroeder had already been serving a life sentence for the 2006 murder of 75-year-old Kenneth Albers, a retired farmer from Pawnee City, Nebraska. Albers had once given him a job and trusted him. That trust was betrayed when Schroeder beat him to death with a nightstick, robbed him, and dumped his body into an abandoned well. Prosecutors described it as a calculated and callous act driven by greed. But the horror didn't end there. More than a decade later, on April 10, 2017, Schroeder was incarcerated at Tecumseh State Correctional Institution when a new cellmate was assigned to him. That cellmate was 22-year-old Terry Berry Jr., serving time for writing bad checks, a nonviolent offense. He was young, quiet, and scheduled for parole in just a few weeks. Prison officials placed him in the same cell as Schroeder with no warning and no protective oversight. From the beginning, Schroeder made his intentions clear. He told Berry, "You need to figure out a way to get out of here or something bad's going to happen to you." 3 days later, Barry was found strangled. He had been placed in a coma and died shortly afterward. Schroeder confessed without hesitation. He was talking too much, he said, and I didn't like him from the start. Instead of denying the charges, Schroeder waived his rights, pleaded guilty, and refused to present any defense. He openly asked the court for the death penalty, saying he would kill again if given the chance. In 2018, a 3-judge panel sentenced him to death, citing the especially cruel and depraved nature of both killings. Schroeder remained stoic and unemotional. He didn't appeal. He never filed for clemency. "I'll just sit here and let the train hit me," he remarked in a later interview. But the train never came. On August 29, 2022, Schroeder was found dead in his cell at age 45. His death remains under investigation, though no foul play has been confirmed. Nebraska's death row population quietly dropped from 12 to 11. The murder of Terry Barry prompted public outcry and a civil lawsuit from his family, who claimed the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services had been grossly negligent. The case, initially dismissed, was later settled for $479,000. This tragedy is a powerful reminder that violence doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes, it's locked inside with you. The quiet horror of this case reveals a truth we often forget: violence doesn't always wear a warning. Never assume prisons are safe for nonviolent inmates without risk screening. Danger may already be in the cell. Housing policies must be threat-based, not convenience-based. One careless assignment can end a life. Families should demand transparency regarding inmate pairings. Terry Barry didn't die in the streets. He died in state custody, in a system built to protect him. Justice isn't just punishment. It's protection. And when we fail one, we compromise the other. Number 3, Aubrey Trail. She didn't walk into a dark alley. She wasn't lured by force. Sydney Luff agreed to a second Tinder date and unknowingly walked straight into her own execution. Aubrey Clifton Trail, now confined to Nebraska's death row at Tecumseh State Correctional Institution, was sentenced in 2021 for a crime that horrified the nation. He was convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and mutilation of human remains. His victim was 24-year-old Sydney Irene Luff, a Menards clerk from Lincoln, Nebraska. She had matched with Trail's girlfriend, Bailey Boswell, on Tinder. Boswell used a fake name, Audrey, and told Sydney they'd be alone. But Trail was already part of the plan. Sydney was cautious. She asked if others would be there. Boswell reassured her. On November 15, 2017, Sydney posted a cheerful Snapchat captioned, "Ready for my date." By night's end, her phone had gone dark. She never came home. The next morning, her employer reported her absence. Her mother called the police. Soon, investigators linked Trail and Boswell to her disappearance. Their apartment smelled of bleach, and oddly, the air conditioner was running in the cold Nebraska November. A landlord noticed something was wrong, but the couple had already vanished. On November 28th, the pair were named persons of interest. They responded not with silence, but with a Facebook live stream. Trail appeared, pleading for Sydney's safe return. But 2 days later, they were found in Missouri with cash, maps, and camping supplies, preparing, it seemed, to flee the country. What the FBI found next was beyond disturbing. On December 4th, Sydney's dismembered remains were discovered along rural roads near Clay County, wrapped in garbage bags. She had been cut into 14 pieces. Her clothing and intimate belongings were found with her body. The autopsy confirmed death by strangulation with an electrical cord. Prosecutors argued that her killing was part of a sexualized murder fantasy. Trail's stories changed. He first claimed her death was a result of rough sex. Later, he said she rejected their lifestyle. Letters recovered in jail hinted at plans to make snuff films for profit. Witnesses testified that Trail called himself a vampire cult leader and had openly fantasized about killing during sex. In court, Trail made a dramatic scene, slashing his throat with a razor blade during trial, shouting that Boswell was innocent. The jury took just 3 hours to convict him. In June 2021, a 3-judge panel sentenced him to death by lethal injection, citing exceptional depravity and premeditation. He showed no emotion. In 2023, Trail petitioned to expedite his execution, all while allegedly arranging a $25,000 murder-for-hire scheme from prison. Sydney's case is a sobering reminder of how predators can use everyday platforms to manipulate and destroy. To avoid becoming a victim in similar scenarios, we need: always verify identities and intentions before meeting someone from dating apps. Share every plan, location, time, and contact with someone you trust. Discretion can be deadly. Trust your instincts. If something feels staged or secretive, walk away. The scariest killers don't always hide in the dark. Some hold the door open and smile. Number 4, Anthony Joseph Garcia. He once wore a lab coat, but behind the credentials and calm demeanor, Anthony Garcia harbored a vendetta that would leave 4 people dead over the span of 5 years, all because his ego couldn't accept failure. Anthony Joseph Garcia, a former pathology resident, was dismissed in 2001 from Creighton University in Omaha due to unprofessional behavior and unethical conduct. His medical career floundered across several states, and with each setback, his anger deepened. He didn't forget those who had criticized him, and he wouldn't forgive them either. On March 13, 2008, Dr. William Hunter returned to find his 11-year-old son, Thomas, murdered inside their home. The housekeeper, Shirley Sherman, lay nearby, both stabbed in the neck with kitchen knives. The timing was calculated, midday, when neither parent would be home. No valuables were taken. The scene suggested rage, not robbery. The investigation stalled for years. Then, on May 14, 2013, former Creighton professor Dr. Roger Brumbach and his wife Mary were found dead in their Omaha home. Roger had helped oversee Garcia's dismissal from the university. He had been shot and stabbed. Mary had multiple stab wounds, with knives left lodged in her body. Just days later, an attempted break-in at Dr. Chandabutra's home, another Creighton pathologist, was thwarted by an alarm system. Investigators connected the dots. Garcia had searched Brumbach's address minutes before the break-in. His phone and credit card data placed him near the scene. Surveillance captured him buying ammo. When arrested in Illinois during a DUI stop, police found weapons, a stethoscope, and a lab coat in his car. DNA from his saliva matched evidence at the attempted burglary. Prosecutors called it revenge, cold, premeditated, and obsessive. Garcia had written a checklist for murder, including notes like use tape on fingers and wear generic shoes. A former acquaintance testified that Garcia once boasted about killing a young boy and an older woman. During his trial, Garcia barely moved, often wearing headphones and appearing detached. His lawyers claimed he was mentally unfit to stand trial. But in 2016, the jury disagreed and convicted him of all 4 murders. In 2018, he was sentenced to death, Nebraska's first such sentence since the state reinstated capital punishment by public vote. He also received 450 years for related charges. Garcia's appeals were rejected in 2023 and 2024. The Nebraska Supreme Court found no grounds to reverse the convictions. He remains on death row at Tecumseh. The Garcia case became a national example of academic retaliation turned deadly, a reminder that brilliance can mask darkness. When personal failure turns to obsession, and obsession turns to revenge, the results can be deadly. What can we learn from this? Dismissed professionals with misconduct histories must be flagged for psychiatric evaluation and public risk monitoring. Academic institutions must track and report former trainees who exhibit threats, fixation, or vengeful behavior. Cold cases should be re-examined when suspects re-emerge in new crimes. Anthony Garcia didn't just take lives, he dismantled the illusion that education and professionalism guarantee stability. And when ego becomes more dangerous than ignorance, no title can protect us. Number 5, Roy Ellis Jr. She was 12, just a girl walking home from school, and then she vanished. What happened next would uncover one of Nebraska's darkest predators. In November 2005, 12-year-old Amber Harris vanished after stepping off her school bus in Omaha, Nebraska. Her disappearance shook the city to its core. Her face adorned posters, flickered on news broadcasts, and haunted every parent's thoughts. For 6 agonizing months, hope persisted through candlelit vigils, but dread consumed her family. Then, in the shadowed depths of Hummel Park, her remains were uncovered in a shallow grave. A book bag, discarded near a registered sex offender's home, held DNA that pointed to Roy Ellis Jr. Ellis was no stranger to infamy. Listed on Nebraska's sex offender registry, he carried a chilling history of child rapes. At his 2008 murder trial, 2 former stepdaughters delivered gut-wrenching testimony. They recounted repeated assaults at ages 12 and 14, each bearing a child fathered by Ellis. Authorities had flagged him as a high-risk predator, a man deemed most likely to reoffend. Yet, he walked free, a latent threat. Prosecutors called him a calculating monster, alleging he targeted Amber at random, driven by a compulsion to destroy. The autopsy revealed a grim truth. Amber died from blunt force trauma, her body bearing signs of sexual assault. Investigators believed Ellis lured her, attacked, and buried her to conceal his crime. His past revealed a pattern of predation unchecked, red flags ignored. The community grappled with outrage and grief, questioning how a known danger slipped through the cracks, leaving Amber to pay the ultimate price. Ellis maintained his innocence, decrying a biased system and an attorney who, he claimed, botched the DNA evidence defense. The jury, unmoved, convicted him of first-degree murder in April 2008. That November, in a Douglas County courtroom, a judge sentenced him to death. Clad in a beige prison jumpsuit, Ellis stood emotionless as the gavel fell, the air thick with the weight of Amber's absence and a family's shattered dreams. Appeals followed over the years. Ellis argued his stepdaughter's testimony prejudiced the jury and demanded a retrial. In June 2022, the Nebraska Supreme Court rejected his claims, affirming the trial's integrity. Today, Ellis remains on death row, one of 11 men in a state where executions are scarce. Nebraska's last execution was in 1997, and lethal injection stalls due to drug shortages. Lawmakers debate nitrogen hypoxia, but justice for Amber feels elusive, a distant promise. Amber's death left enduring scars on her family, her community, and a flawed system that failed to act. Her bright smile, now a memory, underscores the cost of innocence lost to a predator's shadow. The wound festers, a reminder of vigilance neglected and a child stolen too soon. As Amber's tragedy recedes from public view, its lessons remain vital. Known sex offenders must be monitored continuously, not just listed. Law enforcement must act on risk assessments, especially for repeat predators. Communities must educate children on safe routes and reporting danger, even in familiar neighborhoods. These warnings, etched in Amber's loss, compel us to dismantle systemic failures, ensuring no child suffers from society's oversight or inaction. Number 6. Jeffrey Hessler. Some killers stalk the shadows. Others walk right beside us, unnoticed, until it's too late. For 15-year-old Heather Guerrero, danger was just one block away. On February 13, 2003, Heather set out before sunrise to deliver newspapers in Gering, Nebraska. It was her routine. Familiar streets, quiet houses, nothing unusual, until she didn't come home. A neighbor later recalled a scream and a gray car speeding away with its headlights off. That car, a 1994 Nissan Altima, was registered to Jeffrey Hessler. Hessler, 24, lived less than a block from Heather. He worked airport security, but his private life concealed a disturbing obsession. That morning, he abducted Heather mid-route, took her to an abandoned farmhouse near Lake Minnetonka, and held her there. He later confessed to sexually assaulting her and then shooting her in the head after she hinted she would tell someone. He left her body buried shallow in the basement. Her backpack, jacket, and other items were found discarded along the road back into town, evidence of his failed effort to erase her. The town mourned, but the investigation soon revealed Heather was not his only victim. Hessler admitted to raping another 15-year-old girl 2 years prior, also a newspaper carrier. The pattern was undeniable. Prosecutors called it targeted predation. The victims weren't random, they were selected for routine, for youth, for vulnerability. In 2004, Hessler stood trial. He was convicted of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. The jury took less than a day. A 3-judge panel sentenced him to death, citing aggravating factors, prior sexual violence, the murder's role in concealing a crime, and the cruel nature of the act. No credible mitigation was found. At sentencing, Heather's mother, Irene Guerrero, stood strong. "I'd like to see what he gave Heather given exactly back to him," she said. Hessler sat motionless. His legal team argued mental illness, bipolar disorder, delusional thinking, and psychosis should be considered. But the courts ruled he was competent and fully understood the gravity of his actions. The Nebraska Supreme Court upheld his death sentence in 2009 and again in subsequent appeals. Today, Hessler remains on death row at Tecumseh State Correctional Institution. He has no public advocates, no pending appeals, and no execution date. But his case remains one of Nebraska's clearest examples of evil masked by normalcy. Heather wasn't out at night or in a dangerous place. She was doing her job on a safe suburban route. Her murder shattered that illusion of safety, forever changing how her town looked at its own streets. When tragedy strikes the innocent, it demands more than grief, it demands learning. Parents must track their child's daily routes and check-ins. Routine can make them predictable targets. Neighborhoods should publicize high-risk sex offender data with urgency, not silence. Repeat sex offenders require active surveillance, not passive record-keeping. Justice is more than a sentence. It's a mirror, and the reflection it offers depends on whether we choose to look before the next name becomes a headline. Number 7. Jorge Galindo. It took less than a minute. Inside that quiet Nebraska bank, 5 lives were erased, and the state would later ask how something so calculated could spiral so fast. On September 26, 2002, Jorge Galindo entered a U.S. bank branch in Norfolk, Nebraska, armed alongside Jose Sandoval and Eric Vela. Their goal seemed simple, a robbery. But within seconds, the trio opened fire. 5 people, including 4 bank employees and 1 customer, were shot dead. No money was taken. Surveillance later confirmed that Galindo fired the fatal shot that killed Lola Elwood, while another bullet narrowly missed a fleeing customer. The trio fled on foot. They broke into a nearby home, stole a Subaru Outback, and continued west. When that car was abandoned, they hijacked a pickup truck and kept moving. Their spree ended outside a McDonald's in O'Neill, Nebraska. They surrendered without further violence. The scale of violence stunned the nation. What began as a premeditated robbery escalated into an execution-style massacre. Prosecutors argued the killings were intentional, meant to eliminate witnesses. In 2004, Galindo was convicted on 5 counts of first-degree murder. Sentenced to death, he stood in a beige jumpsuit and handcuffs, silent as judges read the sentence. Galindo remains on death row at Tecumseh State Correctional Institution. His accomplices, Sandoval and Vela, were also sentenced to death. Over 2 decades, Galindo mounted a series of appeals, all unsuccessful. In 2023, the Nebraska Supreme Court denied his request for an evidentiary hearing, despite allegations that county officials coerced inmates into providing testimony. 2 justices dissented, arguing that these claims deserved a hearing given the stakes involved, especially a possible execution. In December 2023, Galindo filed a 375-page habeas corpus petition in federal court, detailing 37 alleged constitutional violations in his trial and sentencing. That petition remains pending. Meanwhile, Nebraska has not executed anyone since 2018 due to lethal injection drug shortages, meaning Galindo's sentence remains in limbo. The families of the 5 victims continue to wait, not for revenge, but for closure. Their grief hangs in the balance of procedural delays. The case has transformed the state's capital punishment discourse. Nebraska abolished the death penalty in 2015 and reinstated it via referendum in 2016. Yet decades later, execution remains stalled. Galindo left the bank expecting cash. He left with nothing but shattered lives and headlines. His crime turned a routine bank visit into one of Nebraska's darkest chapters, a massacre that should never have happened. This case illustrates that when justice is delayed and evidence is contested, punishment can become paralysis. And some lessons echo beyond courtrooms. Bank staff and patrons should receive regular training in active shooter protocols. Allegations of coerced testimony must be independently reviewed. Justice cannot rest on silence. States must resolve execution method issues transparently. Delays without closure deepen victim trauma. When the machinery of justice stalls, victims are robbed a second time by time itself. Number 8. Raymond Mata Jr. Some crimes leave no room for doubt, only horror. 3-year-old Adam Gomez wasn't missing. He had been murdered, dismembered, and left in pieces as a message from a man the family once trusted. In March 1999, Patricia Gomez reported her toddler missing from their home in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. Her ex-boyfriend, Raymond Mata Jr., insisted he had no idea where Adam was. But investigators grew suspicious when Patricia was later seen traveling with Mata in Wyoming. It was clear, this wasn't a stranger abduction. It was personal. Without a body, law enforcement sought guidance from retired FBI agent Ron Raywalt. His first order, suspend all garbage pickup. That move proved crucial. Authorities discovered Adams remained scattered and concealed in ways that stunned even seasoned detectives. Fragments were found in Mata's home inside a refrigerator, in a frying pan, even in a dog food bowl. Other parts were flushed into the sewer. Some were retrieved from Mata's dog's stomach. A pathologist confirmed the boy died from blunt force trauma to the head. Prosecutors argued Mata's gruesome handling of the remains was intended to psychologically torture Patricia, a final act of control and cruelty after she ended the relationship. The crime scene left a permanent mark on all who saw it. Ron Raywald described the discovery as one of the worst scenes of his entire career. The forensic horror stunned the court and the community. Mata was arrested and, in 2000, convicted of first-degree premeditated murder and kidnapping. A panel of 3 judges sentenced him to death. But in 2002, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Ring v. Arizona that only juries, not judges, could decide aggravating factors in capital cases. Mata's sentence was vacated. In 2005, a Nebraska jury unanimously determined that Mata's actions met the threshold of exceptional depravity, a legal standard for the worst of the worst. That same year, he was resentenced to death. The court noted he had relished the murder and inflicted unnecessary violence, calling the crime one of rare moral collapse. Mata later challenged the constitutionality of Nebraska's electric chair. In 2008, the Nebraska Supreme Court ruled the method unconstitutional, stopping his execution. The state has since moved to lethal injection, but delays and drug shortages mean no execution date has been set. Mata remains on death row at Tecumseh. Adams' death left behind more than grief. It exposed deep flaws in how domestic threats are recognized and how dangerous individuals are monitored. Because when a child becomes a symbol of revenge, society cannot afford to stay silent. And if this tragedy teaches us anything, it's this. Individuals with a history of domestic violence must be closely monitored. In child abduction cases, investigators should secure garbage and drainage systems early. Critical evidence is often hidden in plain waste. Capital case procedures must swiftly adapt to legal precedent. Justice delayed only prolongs victims' suffering. The justice system must never speak softly when the victim is a voiceless child. Number 9. John Lauder. He was trusted. Then he became a nightmare behind a familiar face, and the lives he destroyed were closer than anyone imagined. In December 1993, Brandon Teena, a 21-year-old transgender man living in Humboldt, Nebraska, thought he had found safety. But safety turned to horror when John L. Lauder and Marvin Neeson invaded the farmhouse. Just days before, they had sexually assaulted Brandon at a Christmas Eve party, a crime Brandon reported to law enforcement. Sheriff Lox's inexplicable inaction left Brandon vulnerable, but Lauder and Neeson's murderous plan carried on. On New Year's Eve, December 31st, the pair returned armed and fueled by vengeance after hearing the report had gone to police. They had planned murder and mutilation. That night, they killed Brandon Teena, shot Lisa Lambert, who sheltered him, and fatally wounded Philip Devine. In the chaos, Brandon was stabbed after being shot. The brutality was calculated. Prosecutors showed that Lauder had stolen the gun, acquired gloves and a knife, and intended to silence witnesses. Lauder testified in his own defense, calling Neeson a liar, but forensic evidence told another story. Gloves stamped with his name and weapons found in a frozen river left no doubt. In May 1995, he was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder, multiple weapons charges, and burglary. On February 21, 1996, Lauder stood before a panel of 3 judges in a beige jumpsuit and shackles. He remained expressionless as the sentence was read. The court found aggravating factors: murders committed to impede law enforcement and conceal felony. A jury deliberated for just 5 hours before affirming the sentence: death by lethal injection. Lauder's appeals continued. In 2007, Neeson recanted, claiming full responsibility and asserting Lauder never fired a shot. Yet in 2009, Nebraska's Supreme Court ruled that even if Neeson lied, Lauder's role and indifference justified the sentence. His legal team later raised his low IQ, 67, as evidence of intellectual disability, invoking Atkins v. Virginia. That appeal is still pending. In 2008, the state Supreme Court ruled that electrocution was cruel and unusual punishment, halting executions. Nebraska shifted to lethal injection, but no execution date has been set. Lotta remains on death row at Tecumseh State Correctional Institution, his fate unresolved. Brandon's murder left a raw wound and exposed institutional failure. His mother filed a wrongful death suit, revealing Sheriff Locke's prejudice. The case became a landmark in LGBTQ+ legal history, inspiring the film Boys Don't Cry and sparking national dialogue on hate crimes. In the end, 3 lives were destroyed. Their deaths, birthed from hatred, ask a final question: when systems fail the marginalized, can justice ever truly heal? Now, here's what this case demands. When assault is reported, law enforcement must act immediately. Delays enable retaliation. Intellectual disability claims should be assessed early to ensure fair sentencing and avoid endless appeals. Hate crime protections must be enforced, not symbolic. Justice must speak loudest when the victim is most vulnerable. Silent justice is no justice, especially when it fails those at the margins of society. 9 men. 9 death sentences. But in Nebraska, death row is more a waiting room than an ending. Behind every sentence is a story the public can't forget, and some the system may never fully answer. Which name haunts you most? Let us know in the comments. This is just one chapter in America's darkest ledger. To uncover more true crime cases, raw, verified, unforgettable, subscribe to Justice Reversed and tap the bell icon. Justice may be slow, but here, the truth always arrives.